Hello there, AP Huggernauts. This is Mr. B, and today I'm covering Learning Target 1.7 Regional Analysis. Guess what? This is the last learning target of Unit 1. Begin celebrations now. The objective for today is to describe different ways that geographers define regions. Now, this map is how the AP College Board defines global regions, and this is a must-know map. Okay, so from this day forward, I want you to take 10 minutes every day, stare at this map, and absorb it into your mind. Eventually, you also need to identify key countries in each of these global regions. For example, how China is in East Asia while India is in South Asia. Geographers apply a regional analysis at all scales of inquiry and all scales of analysis. And by regional analysis, I'm talking about region definition, studying regions to uncover spatial patterns and relationships, and comparing regions with one another. Regionalization is a process where geographers divide the world into smaller units of study or regions, the same way a writer would take a book and divide that book into chapters and place a name with each chapter. Okay? Geographers create regions and engage in a regionalization process to make it easier to study spatial relationships and spatial patterns. So the process itself involves first a geographer selecting some characteristic to study. Next, the geographer is going to collect data on that characteristic and then map the spatial extent of that characteristic, thereby creating a region. Please realize that regionalization is an ongoing process, and as the characteristics of study change, the borders of regions will change. Regions themselves are a collection of places that share one or more unifying characteristics or patterns of activity. And those characteristics, they can be human or they can be physical. Okay? The three types of regions that you need to be aware of are formal regions, functional regions, and vernacular regions, also known as perceptual regions. So formal regions are basically where a geographer has taken a very specific and measurable trait and collected data on that trait and then mapped that data. These are not regions off the top of your head. These are regions that have been created with a data collection and data analysis process. And the most basic type of formal region is a country. Okay, the country has very defined borders, and that very specific trait would be the government that has political power over the country. So let's look at the bottom left map here and say I go from Brazil and cross the border into Peru. Now in Brazil, I'm going to have to worry about the government of Brazil. But once I cross the border into Peru, now I'm going to be concerned with the government of Peru. The same applies to Illinois and Indiana, Georgia, Florida, and so on. In Illinois, okay, all the communities are under kind of the authority of the Illinois state government. In Indiana, it's the Indiana state government. And again, it also applies in Chicago. Within Chicago city limits, we have the mayor and the city council. Outside of Chicago city limits, it's some other local government behind local laws, rules, and regulations. Here's an example of an economic formal region, and this deals with the European Union. And what the economic characteristic that's unifying of all the members is the use of a common currency or the euro. Once you leave the European Union, you're going to have to exchange your currency. Let's also take a moment to look at the UK, who was a former member of the European Union. They decided to leave the party. Here we have an environmental formal region that's based on physical characteristics, and this is the Sahara Desert, which separates North Africa from sub-Saharan Africa. Now, those physical characteristics could deal with annual precipitation or rainfall amounts. It could deal with the fact that there's sand covering land areas, while in other areas there's not sand coverage. Okay, physical climate-based characteristics are being used to define the borders of this environmental formal region. Now, functional regions are organized around some central node or focal point, okay? And the central node could deal with economics, it could deal with travel, it could deal with communication. And this is what separates functional regions from formal regions. I could describe a formal region such as a country and not identify any central node. When I'm talking about a functional region and describing a functional region, I'm always going to mention that central node or that focal point, okay? And some other terminology to be aware of is in a functional region, we have the center node, and then the area of filling around that node, okay, the rest of the region, that's known as a hinterland. So you have a hinterland that's influenced by a central node, and that's what makes up a functional region. So some examples. Let's look at the bottom left here. We have an airport. Okay, airports are a major central node of travel activity. Okay, and it's economic activity as well. And people in surrounding communities will go to that airport for air travel, right? Eventually, if you get far enough away from the airport, there might be some other closer airport that people would go to. Hence, those people going to a different airport would no longer be a part of the functional region of that one airport. Okay, the middle map is showing us the L system in Chicago. Notice how all the different train lines converge at the loop. So the loop becomes the central node or focal point of this travel system, and the borders of the functional region become the last stops on each of the different L lines. The last example here in the bottom right would be the delivery area for a particular Jimmy John's. Now, delivery areas form functional regions, with the central node being the restaurant, and then the hinterland or delivery area being the rest of the region. Okay, if I live outside the delivery of this Jimmy John's, I better find a different place for my sandwich, or I'm going to be hungry. Another example, we have TV broadcast areas. Okay, the central node in this region would be the tower that emits the broadcast signal, and the hinterland or filling of the region would be the area where people could tune into that channel. Same concept would apply with radio stations as well. If you live outside the broadcast area, you're going to be watching a different channel, listening to a different station. Now I'm going to go back a couple slides to show you another example of a functional region that deals with sports teams. Sports teams that play in the stadium, that stadium is a central node, the focal point of the team, and becomes the center of a functional region. The surrounding area or hinterland of that region would be where we have the highest concentration and density of fans who actually go to the stadium to watch a competition. Last type of region you need to know is a perceptual or vernacular region, and yes, you want to be comfortable with both names. This is a very informal region that's based on a person's perception of a place, okay, or a person's perspective. It's off the top of your head. It's the exact opposite of a formal region. It's not based on data collection and analysis. It's what you think, okay? Now, perceptual regions are important because they can give us little information on a person's sense of place and their cultural identity, okay, that emotional attachment that they have with places. But please realize, since we're basing the region off of a person's perception, the boundaries can vary widely from person to person and from cultural group to cultural group because different groups and different people have different sense of places and different cultural identities. One example of a perceptual region would be the American South. If I'm just going and interviewing people on the street and asking them, what states are in the South, I might get a very different set of answers depending on the people I ask. Okay, for example, if I'm just going around Illinois and asking people, some people might place Kentucky in the American South. Other people might say if anything below Interstate I-80 in Illinois, that's all the South. Okay, so if people are talking about a region from their mind, from the top of their head, it's really a perceptual region. Okay. Now, please realize that regional boundaries are transitional, contested, and overlapping. They're transitional in the sense that they can change over time. They're contested in that, well, maybe two governments of two different countries are arguing over territory and ownership of that territory. And they're overlapping in the sense that a place could actually occupy more than one region, and those regions could overlap. One example of the overlapping region, let's look at Mexico and Central America on this map. Now, Mexico and Central America are part of North America. There's one region, but culturally, they're part of Latin America with that shared heritage of Spanish and Portuguese influence. Therefore, Mexico and Central America, we have two regions, North America and Latin America. Okay, so they exist in two overlapping regions. Same could apply to Egypt in the Middle East. Okay, a lot of people will place Egypt in the Middle East, even though Egypt technically exists on the continent of Africa and not Asia. Okay, but I'll give you one example of a contested region. We take Ukraine, okay, in Eastern Europe. Now, the Crimean Peninsula, which was part of Ukraine, left the country. So the Crimea left the Ukraine as a formal region, and then Crimea was actually annexed or became part of Russia. So the Crimea joined the formal region of Russia. So there we had a contested area that actually switched regions. So again, please realize regions can change over time. They're transitional. They can be contested as countries fight over the borders of regions, and regions can overlap with one another. Your ultimate goal is to realize what the regionalization process is, what a region actually is, and be able to differentiate the formal, functional, and the perceptual regions. Thank you, and have a great day.